Head-on collision leads to a six-figure recovery for our client, made possible because she was patient during the negotiation process and allowed the attorney to fight the insurance company to get maximum value on the case. Shane from Shane Smith Law. I'm here today to talk to John, one of the attorneys here at Shane Smith Law, about a recent client victory he received. John, tell us about this case and what kind of results you got.
Sure thing, Shane. So in this case, we had a client who was a young female who was involved in a pretty serious head-on collision that left the vehicle severely damaged and practically shredded down one side. When the defendant became inattentive while operating their vehicle, it definitely caused some serious accidents with some serious injuries to the client.
Yeah, it sounds like a massive collision. Hit head on. I mean, that's everybody's worst nightmare, I think, is they're driving down the road and somebody just drifts right over and hits them. Was she hurt at the scene or what were injuries?
Yes, the client was definitely injured on the scene, especially like you mentioned, you're driving down the road, following the rules of the road. When someone comes into your lane, it is certainly everyone's worst nightmare, and it was this client's worst nightmare as well. The accident left her very severely injured at the scene. She sustained some pretty serious spinal injuries that we would later confirm with good medical treatment, but it definitely did not resolve shortly after the accident.
So ultimately, what were injuries or what was the treatment she had to receive?
So the client started with some conservative care, which is what typically is the best way to start off treatment after an accident. So we can get down swelling, get back some mobility, and take kind of a first assessment as to what sort of injuries were sustained. And then we shortly thereafter got the client in to see a specialist who, pain management specialist, really specialize in spinal pain. That spinal pain was coming from the client's lower back and mid back, where the spine when it experiences really sudden stops in an impact, you see flexion of the spine that can cause damage to the vertebrae, which can bulge a disc or herniate a disc. Unfortunately, the client suffered both of those types of injuries to her spine in this accident.
Wow. And so you said she received conservative care in the beginning and it moved to other things. What ultimately did she end up having right before, or I guess her final treatment?
So the client, conservative care is typically like physical therapy and chiropractic care. And then it gets escalated, trying medications. When that doesn't work, we typically see the client get recommended MRIs, which is great legal medical evidence documenting the injuries, also confirming or ruling out other serious stuff. So that imaging helped us identify the injuries. We then there were then injections that were administered to the client. Those injections are actually medicine that goes into the spine that can help reduce inflammation to see how bad the bulge or herniation is. Some clients, a good number, see resolution after those injections. The ones that don't have to get and receive an additional set of injections, which this client had to do in this case. And then when no injections fully resolve the pain, we then look and see for surgical recommendations, which is essentially how this case was resolved, with a future surgical recommendation for the client to receive some surgical intervention on her spine.
And what kind of resolution did you get for the client?
So in this matter, we were able to get with a little bit of back and forth with the insurance company, we were eventually able to get them to tender all of their limits, which in this case exceeded six figures. So it was a very good resolution for the client, considering the client didn't even get the surgery. It was just based off the recommendation of one of the specialists that surgery may be medically necessary in the future.
Okay. So great result for the client, you said, a six-figure recovery. How did the client feel about the resolution?
The client was certainly ecstatic. Obviously, after an accident of this magnitude and everything that she went through, as well as the extensive amount of treatment, she was very excited to get the case resolved. It only spent, a few months in negotiations. We noticed that the insurance company initially came out with an offer that was about half the full tendered limits, and didn't really put up a lot of fight and kept inching their offer up without us giving new information. That is a key kind of indicator that the insurance company is trying to save a buck, which is what we noticed really quick on this one, is that they were just trying to save money, lowball, make some profits on this. And they kept inching up. Luckily, after some conversations with the client, able to keep her on board with allowing us to kind of just know the full value of her case. And sometimes that's where experience comes into play, is knowing what you've got so that the insurance company can't gaslight you essentially and
Right.
take in a much lower offer than you're deserved, or knowing that you've been kind of at this for a while and that you've got bills to pay and trying to lowball you. But certainly when we heard the adjuster making statements like, well, can we please get this resolved, or can you get it resolved for this amount? We know we've got them, on the retreat and backing up against the ropes, because we know that they know that we know we've got good value on this case. And that's essentially what we got them to, and got them to give us all their money.
So it sounds like here, one of the key parts was that the client was on board with letting you spend the time you needed to do to get it resolved for maximum value.
Absolutely. I mean, you think about it, when someone has been out of work because of injuries so severe, every penny counts and every dollar counts. And it's very enticing. And the insurance company is well aware of this. It's very enticing when they put out an initial, what we deem a lowball offer, that still is a considerable amount of money to anyone. But in the scope of the injuries and what you need future treatment, we have to try and help our clients and guide them and explain that this is not a good offer. It's a lot of money to anyone, but it's not a good offer in the scope of what you went through and what you may need to go through. And luckily, the client was on board with that, took our advice, relied on kind of, our expertise in dealing with these types of cases. And we were able to essentially get a double the amount of the offer of what it was originally and initially.
Wow, sounds like a great job, John. And I'm sure the client appreciated it as well. So good work.
Thank you, Shane.
If you're listeners, hit like and subscribe down below. See your next client victory here from Shane Smith Law. Remember, if you're in pain, call Shane 980-909-9999.
In pain, call Shane.
980-999-9999. 980-999-9999. Shane Smith Law. In pain, call Shane.